Hi, this is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in to Simply Enough.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period. Welcome to Simply Enough, where we celebrate you.
Because you are enough. Just as you are.
Period. Previous week's episode, we talked about the feeling or the sense or the identity of less than or not enough. Having said that, that feeling of being different plays into the feeling of not enoughness.
As a queer youth, I can tell you the number of things that I did to change my behavior or change who I was as a point of survival.
Because hurt people hurt people. But the most dangerous place is when hurt people who can hurt people are put in positions of authority.
If we incorrectly label other people, we don't get to see them for who they are because we have now limited how we're going to interact with them. Aloha and hello, everybody. Welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
And I'm punting it to you today because you are going to kick us off, Dr. Ignacio, which I know you love so
I
much.
love starting the episode. Okay, so let's kick it off. First of all, a moment of confession. That's always a great way to start an episode, is a confession. So the previous week's episode, we talked about the feeling or the sense or the identity of less than or not enough. And, you know, the confession is that a lot of editing occurred at the previous episode. Thank you, Zachary. Because what was edited out was actually, I had a little tearful breakdown because I was just so triggered by hearing your stories of of being told that you're not handsome enough, and then how that carried through in terms of not feeling handsome enough. Mm-hmm. And that actually triggered me in terms of my feelings of less than and not enough. So there was a lot of crying going on, ugly face crying, everybody. And so Zachary was gracious enough to edit all of that out. So thank you. But for the sake of authenticity, I just felt that I had to confess that, you know, I don't have it all together and I don't have all of the answers all the time. And there's a lot that I have worked through and healed through, but, you know, life is made up of moments, and there are more moments than not where I have felt that I've worked through and healed through things. And then there are unpredictable moments where feelings and emotions that are raw come through because of you know, prior wounds and prior thought processes. So I just wanted to start vulnerably and authentically with that confession, because we all have those feelings and we all have those moments. And that was the whole damn reason for this Simply Enough podcast. Not for us to have all the answers for everybody, but more so just that we're all on a journey and that we can all relate to each other. And there's so much more that is similar amongst all of us than what differentiates us. But having said that, that feeling of being different definitely plays into the feeling of not enoughness. And, you know, it's kind of like Goldilocks, you know, one can either feel less than or not enough, or the flip side to the same coin is feeling too much of something or being told that, you know, you're too much of something. And ultimately, less than or too much plays into our feeling of different and inadequate. And I happened to just come back from a fantastic family vacation in Disney. And I thought of you daily, Zachary, when we were at Disney, because I know how much Stitch means to you. I find Stitch cute too, but for reasons unbeknownst to me, I know that Stitch has deeper feelings and resonance with you. And I thought of you while I was at Disney because Stitch was everywhere. So I was just wondering if in talking about being different or too much of something, if you could share with us why Stitch means so much to you.
Absolutely. I love talking about Stitch like I like talking about penguins. But before that, you're not going to get off the hook that quickly. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for sharing what was a very real moment for you with our listeners. One, I felt incredibly blessed, as I've told you, to have that moment with you. And I think that, for anybody listening, as we start to unpack these, the root causes of our feelings of less than or not enoughness, sometimes even if we think we're well past it, something may bring us back, and we find, oh no, there's still some residual feelings there that are worth acknowledging, and then figuring out what to do with or not to do with. And that's very real, and it's very human. And so for you to be able to just say that, and to still have so much strength in saying that you had a real reaction to that story, it was unpredictable. And I think that's highly relatable. And so I just encourage all of our listeners and viewers, if there is a moment that you share with yourself or with another individual, or you want to actually have a conversation with somebody about something that you identified of not feeling enough or less than, take a cue from Dr. Ignacio, because you can always come back to it. So before we talk about Stitch, I just wanted to give you a little kudos there.
Oh,
you weren't off the hook just yet. So
thank you for, and then this is what everybody, I hope, looks for within themselves, or even with others, or even honestly, just as a reminder, reach out to us.
Mm-hmm.
You can reach out to us via our website. You can actually leave voice commentary or written commentary, so that you don't feel alone. And that if you want to share your own stories, we welcome them, and we're here for you, because we want to offer you that same grace and space that Zachary offered me in my moment of crying breakdown. And you did so beautifully, without judgment, and just sitting there with me in that space, and not even so much to try to make me feel better or try to cheer me up, but just you saw me and you heard me, and you were with me in that moment and in that space. So thank you for that. And, we welcome our listeners and our viewers to do the same in their own lives, with their own people, or even reach out to us.
Yeah.
But I did just realize that I jumped into, in talking about my fabulous vacation with Disney, and I just threw out the name Stitch. Might it be true that there might be some viewers and listeners who don't know who Stitch is?
Yeah.
So let's clarify that. Sorry.
I was gonna give a little synopsis. So Lilo and Stitch is a movie that Disney made. It's kind of was a bit of an interesting departure from like the Disney Renaissance movies, where the Beauty and the Beast, the Little Mermaid, Mulan, Pocahontas, this kind of female-driven storyline. This is when their animation really they brought in new innovative techniques with animation, and really brought Disney back, so to speak, as some people would say, into the Disney Renaissance. Well, Lilo and Stitch was a departure, because first of all, they're two leading protagonists, if you will. One is an alien who's Stitch, and the other one is this little girl named Lilo who lives in Hawaii. They don't actually specify, but many believe that she's on the island of Kauai, and she lives with her sister. And it's, as they talk about in the movie, it's a broken family, or broken ohana, because their parents have passed away. You don't really learn the specifics, but you understand that Nani, her sister, is taking care of her. And that's not going well, because there's a social worker that shows up, and Nani is just ill-equipped to be raising a daughter. So anyway, big departure for Disney. And also, just because it was a diversion in their typical formula, it didn't really connect with audiences in the same way that some of the more, I don't want to say traditional, because that even sounds, but the pattern of stories that they had established up until then. However, okay, so Stitch is created. He lives in a faraway planet. He's created by what's considered this like evil genius, with the sole purpose to just be a rascal, to destroy and wreak havoc. Well, naturally, if that's the way he's programmed, or that was what he's built, he's not going to take it too well when the government of that planet tries to put parameters on him and control him or whatnot. So he escapes and he lands on the island of Kauai. Okay. His two big things are he loves to destroy major cities and he hates water. Well, tough luck, Stitch, because you're now on Kauai where there are no big cities and you're surrounded by water. And I just think he's cute. He's like little and blue and he's got all these arms and these antennas. But as he quickly realizes when he lands on Earth that he has to somewhat adjust himself so that he doesn't stand out. Okay. So already we start to see this idea of difference, right? Stitch was, well, at least told that he was programmed and built to destroy. Okay. I mean, I think we can start to see the connections between Simply Enough and Stitch. And also I'll get into why I find him to be such a metaphor for education too, because there's a whole nother connection there. But anyway, so Stitch is, he's programmed to be destructive.
And almost too much, right?
Too much.
In what you're saying is that he has to mute himself so as to not call attention to himself. So he has to diminish himself and be less of himself so as not to draw attention to himself.
Yep. It's and a point of survival. I mean, there's a whole avenue there, which I'll just make a connection as a queer youth. Like I can tell you the number of things that I did to change my behavior or change who I was as a point of survival. Okay. So, I mean, we're already starting to peel back the layers of a really rich central figure and with a highly relatable, character and just what they're dealing with. Right. Then you have Lilo, who similarly is a bit of an outcast. She's a little odd as they try to paint her compared to the other girls. And she just thinks about things differently. She looks at life differently. And it's clear that she struggled to make friends and to fit in because of the way in which she sees the world. Okay, so now we have Lilo and Stitch. We've kind of set them up in a parallel way. Nani herself is also somewhat of an outsider. That's the sister. But we can see that Lilo and Stitch can connect with each other because they both understand what it's like to feel different or to feel too much of something, too destructive or too silly. Or anyways, I don't want to ruin the movie too much if you do get to see it. What happens that's really kind of remarkable is that Stitch throughout the movie comes to learn about himself because the factors in which he was quote unquote created and expected to behave were taken away. Okay, so there was no big city and now he's surrounded by water. And he also starts to find his ohana or his family. And I say ohana on purpose because they actually talk about it in the movie. The quote that they use is ohana means family and family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. So you see Stitch really transform and actually Lilo start to transform when they feel connected. Okay. And then you see Stitch start to use his capabilities to actually protect his family or to defend himself or protect himself for good. So this like, it's okay to be an outsider message starts to develop as the movie goes on. On top of all that, it's just funny as hell. I'm sorry, but it's silly. There are like aliens, Jumba and Pleatley, that come to the planet to like take him back, and they're goofy, and just the antics that Stitch goes through is just really fun and highly entertaining. Elvis is a theme in there because, Elvis's connection to Hawaii. So there's some really good music. But at the end of the day, Stitch to me captures, and this is my connection to education or just life in general, if we incorrectly label other people, we set up expectations of behavior on them. And we don't get to see them for who they are because we have now limited how we're going to interact with them. Mm-hmm. And as an educator, I can tell you the number of times with the best of intentions, I myself, and I'll admit it, and other educators sought to label children as, oh, they're too difficult, or they're too challenging, or they're too talkative, or they're too playful, or they're too this, or they're too that, right? Two. And then it's self-fulfilling prophecy. Mm-hmm. And then the next teachers see them the same way, and the next teachers see them the same way, and the next teachers see them the same way. So for me, Stitch is the perfect example of how, if we do that, we do a tremendous disservice to the beauty that those children offer, the beauty that those lives are, and then also the tremendous benefits that come with who they are and what they offer. So I'm actually going to pull this little guy out too. So for our viewers, you're going to get a special treat here. But for our listeners, you might want to go check this out on YouTube. So my friend Todd and Sean got me this little Stitch stuffed animal. So right now I'm showing off Stitch, but he has a little onesie on, and his onesie says "Simply Enough" on it.
Yay, our mascot. Stitch is our mascot.
He's so cute. And then Dr. Ignacio also, do you want to talk about what you just realized about the colors?
So when Zachary showed this to me, it's so cute. So the colors of our logo and the colors of our website, which incorporates the same colors of our logo, are actually Stitch's colors.
They are.
So how perfect is that? It's you took my breath away a little bit when you were talking about connection, and how with labeling of being too much, too loud, too talkative, too boisterous, too this, too that, how that can get in the way of connection. And it made me think of there was an article that I was reading about, again, we always say this in many episodes, words matter. Mm-hmm. And the label of that child, that kid, that teenager is just attention seeking. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're behaving that way. I mean, it's such an attention seeker, and said with such disdain. But actually, if you change the word and realize, actually, perhaps they're connection seeking. Mm-hmm. And that might be the only way they know how to do it. And they're so desperate for connection that it comes off as a plea, a desperate attempt for attention. Mm-hmm. To change that perspective of that teenager, that child is connection seeking, allows for what we always talk about in terms of some space and grace and recognition and compassion for what that behavior really is veiling. So sorry, I digress a little bit, but it took my breath away when you commented on connection, and how in being too much of something, what in somebody else's estimation mm-hmm. of being too much of something, how very alienating and isolating that is. Mm-hmm.
It is. And then also, if we continue, I love the reframing of connection seeking. I wish I'd had that when I was a teacher and an administrator, but I'm just going to keep it with me. But I will also say is, well, what's wrong with them seeking attention? Something is clearly deficient in their life. They need something. So right. Why is that their fault? You know what I mean? And in the act of seeking attention, you're absolutely right. They are seeking connection, which, getting back to Stitch, 100% Lilo, Stitch, and some of the other supporting characters clearly need to feel connected. And even more so if you're an outsider, right? You need to feel some sense of normalcy, because all the messaging that you're getting, and I know I got this as a youth, queer youth, was you're different, and different's not always good. So I love connection seeking. Thank you for reframing that. Yeah.
And even reframing normal, which let's be right. So let's be honest, really, most of the time when the word normal is used, is really that's a euphemism, if it's a euphemism, but a euphemism for acceptable. Mm-hmm. And if that's truly the case, that it's not really normal versus abnormal, but really it's a quote nicer way of saying acceptable versus unacceptable, then we have to weigh in on, well, who's the judge?
Yep.
Who is the judge? Who is the holder of that value of what is mm-hmm. acceptable or unacceptable? Perhaps we should all be our own individual Goldilocks, meaning we decide for ourselves, in ourselves, what is too hot, what is too cold, and what is just right. What is less than, what is too much, and what is simply enough, period. Be our own Goldilocks. because again, normal is just another way of saying acceptable. And again, we just have to step back objectively and think, on whose terms, who's the judge of what's acceptable. A totally kind of flippant, like, trivial story, but so I have been on Magnum PI. I can even call it a recurring role. Magnum PI, the TV show, for those who don't know, on CBS. And I guess I can call myself a recurring role because I've played, dun dun dun, wait for it, a doctor. Oh. that was my role on these 2 episodes, was a doctor. And the second show, the second episode that I was on, I was blessed to have this kick-ass badass, I freaking loved her, female woman director. And I just loved her. She's so full of energy and chutzpah, but also such grace and kindness. And Allison, that's her name. She happened to have also directed, amongst many other things, she's so wonderful, but directed a number of episodes for Grey's Anatomy, which, for those of you who don't know, is also a doctor-based, hospital-based show. And first of all, shout out to her. I do have to tell this really quick story in that, or long story, everybody, sorry. But when, for the episode when we were shooting, I was literally a doctor, and they gave me a doctor's badge with the doctor's name on it, and the doctor had a name in the script, so this was clearly a doctor's role. And the members of the crew in placing me and instructing me and that kind of thing, and who are all lovely and gracious, would keep saying though, like, okay, well, nurse, you go there, or okay, well, the nurse is going to stand here and shoot the spotlight on the nurse. And I mean, I didn't say anything, first of all, because I love the many, many nurses in my life who I would not be who or where I was without them. Oh my God, I'm so grateful to the fabulous nurses who are in my life. Plus, this is just a show, I'm playing a role. This is not real life. This is, acting. So, I don't care what they call me, just tell me where to go and where to be and what to say. So, it didn't bother me that they weren't calling me doctor. But anyway, this director who didn't know in real life, I am a doctor.
Okay.
I loved it though, because she, one last time a crew member said, okay, well, nurse, can you stand over here and hold this prop? And she, God bless you, Allison, she said, okay, first of all, wait a minute, everybody. I'm tired of you calling her nurse. She is a doctor. Okay. She is a doctor, and women, it's 2022 now at this point. It's 2022. Women are doctors too. Can you get with the program? And I laughed and I pulled her aside and I said, Allison, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a doctor in real life. So thank you so much for saying that. But anyway, that's a side note that may be edited, and I totally, it's great if you edit it exactly. But anyway, keep it. So back to Allison though, and back to too much, not enough, just right, and according to whom. So again, clearly she has ideas in her mind of the role and persona of doctors and hospital life, because she's directed Grey's Anatomy. And so there was one scene where I came out and I was to tell parents about how their son survived and the surgery went well and that kind of stuff. And we did a couple takes because of different viewpoint, different camera views. And Allison was so cute. She pulled me aside. And by that point, she did know that I was a doctor in real life, not only a doctor, but a surgeon. And I'm playing a surgeon on this role. And she says, Doc, I know you're a doctor in real life, but can you just not be so happy? And I was like, oh, you mean like tone down my smile and whatever? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, but the news is good. Like the surgery went well. And she was like, yes, but remember, you've been in surgery all night. You're really tired. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't want to show that to the patient. And she finally was like, playfully and kindly exasperated with me, because then she said, I know you're a doctor in real life, but this is TV doctoring. Okay, doc. So can you just tone down the smile a little bit? I'm like, okay, too much smile, too much smile. And then in another scene, I'm like looking over an MRI or whatever. And then I was given can you not be so serious?
Oh, geez.
And I'm just kind of like,
Which
too much, not enough. And it's just, yeah, and I laugh about it and I joke about it because it's such a wonderful experience. And I love Allison. Allison, I will work with you anytime for free. She was so awesome. But it's just, that's, a little story of a fictional show, but extrapolate that in real life.
Oh yeah.
You cannot be all things to everybody in every moment. And so that's where you as an individual just decide, like Goldilocks, what is, not enough, what is too much, or what is just right.
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
It totally made sense. And I could just see you like, but you said not to be happy. Yeah, but that's a different scene. But now I'm too serious. Yes, you're too serious. Okay, I'm very confused.
Because in real life, right? Like, the MRI is indicating that we're going to have to do surgery. So I'm going to like take a serious tone. No, too serious. Okay. The other scene. Hey, your son pulled through. Surgery went great. No, you're tired. You're exhausted. Tone down the smile. I'm like, oh, okay. Not
Which
enough,
also,
too much. But
it's so you in that, because you have said on this podcast, and you've also shared with me, surgery juices you. So of course, if surgery goes well, not only are you like, this is your what you're pulled to do, and this is what you are in your zone to be able to come out and deliver good news to a family, plus the juice of just doing it. Of course, you're going to be like, rock on, that went well.
And that's why to apply this to real life, there I was acting and scene. Okay, but that's acting. But in real life, everybody, we show up in real life as ourselves in the moment.
Yep.
Be Goldilocks. Choose for yourself what is just right. And never mind the not enoughness or the too much that people place on you, that others put on you. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And for those of you that have kids or that work with kids that don't quite know that yet, here are a couple things that you can think about. Because as adults, we can walk ourselves through that process, right? But that you said it earlier, the power of our words is so transformative, particularly in the lives of the youth who are still figuring that out, or still, formulating who they are and how it fits in. So a very real example, maybe a little simple, but I certainly think for those of you that have parents, or those of you that are educators or work with children. Okay, so let's say your child or somebody, kid that you're working with comes up to you and they have a piece of art that they created. Okay. And they say, Dr. Ignacio, I made this. What do you think? Okay. You have a perfect Goldilocks moment to spin it back and say, it's not what I think, it's what you think. Tell me what you worked on. Tell me what you see. Right. And then what's interesting is kids will they'll either tell you like, oh, I was struggling here and or I really like this. And you can guide them. Like, tell me what you're proud of in this, or tell me, what maybe gave you some challenge or frustrated you a little bit. So you can walk them through their own thinking so that they can articulate it. And then what you might also hear is them say things like, I think it's to this, or I think it's to that. You have a great opportunity to then lean into that and then share with them, sometimes I feel that way too. And then help them be their own Goldilocks. So that they become the 40-year-old and the 50-year-old who don't really need to think about it as much. It just happens organically. You know what I mean? Right.
And if I can add on top of that,
please.
And as much as, especially with, your expertise as an educator, and my talking often from a place of being a mom.
Yep.
And what we can do to help in terms of word choice and word framing and perspective for our kids. The truth of the matter is pursuant to my crying breakdown at the last episode, we as adults, we have learned and taken on our own wounds that we have to heal through. And so a lot of times before we can even teach the kids, we have to practice it for ourselves and give ourselves self-compassion and space and grace to practice this. And I say this non-judgmentally, actually, because very much so, because a lot of the things that we do as adults, and this isn't to blame our parents because it continues, meaning a lot that we have learned that it would be ideal to unlearn as adults is from what we picked up as youth, whether it's from parents, other adults, teachers, and whatnot. And those parents, teachers, adults, when we were youth, they have their own wounds because of how perhaps they were brought up. And so the generational wounds, this generational trauma, this curriculum, if you will, that has been passed on, take it upon ourselves as adults now, as the 40-year-olds and the 50-year-olds and the 30-year-olds, in terms of tossing that curriculum and starting with ourselves first as a student and giving ourselves the space and the grace and the compassion. I specifically say this because as much as Disney, I was at Disneyland and Disney World, and all the Disneys, in the world are known to be the happiest place on earth. And it is masterful how Disneyland, for example, that was started in the 50s or 60s, I don't know when, still has that same magic with some of the same buildings. So it's not even all the technology and everything, but the experience has been carried on. So it does create this happy environment. But even within that, there have been moments that I witnessed, because yes, kids break down, it's nap time and that kind of stuff. But even in seemingly great moments, once again, I'm being elusive. Here's the story. So here we're at Disneyland. We're having a great time. The kids and I are noticing actually how wonderfully happy families seem to be with each other. And there are grandparents that are there for the first time ever. And they have the first trip to Disneyland, pin and button on. And you're seeing adults wear the Mickey Mouse ears and reliving their youth. And it's a joyful, happy place. But we also witnessed one thing that we talked about actually, because it got all of our attention, was there was a family and we were getting off of the Thunder Mountain ride. And so we're exiting, and one child, teenager, said, "Oh, I left my, I don't know what, earphones, I don't know what. I left my phone on the roller coaster. I'm so unlucky." And he was about to leave to turn around and go get it. And the mom says, "You're not lucky, you're stupid." Oh. And my heart broke. And let me just tell you this for clarification. My heart broke, and I don't tell the story in judgment of the parent, because just like we talk about how really what's known to be attention-seeking behavior really is connection-seeking behavior, I will also say that hurt people hurt people. And what I mean by that is I actually have empathy for the mom whose instinctive reaction and thought process that it was okay to say something like to her child, "You're not unlucky, you're stupid." That has to come from a place of her own wound and her own experience, perhaps as a child or perhaps as a teenager. Hurt people hurt people. And so in saying something so hurtful and what might have been very normal for her to say, you peel that layer and recognize, well, if that's normal for her to say, it's because it probably was said to her and normalized to her. And this is where, again, I'm sorry for this long digression and verbosity, but the point is that as much as we're wanting to frame things and to shape how kids can see things differently and say things differently, a lot of times it starts with us first as adults, where we have our own self-compassion and self-practice of grace and space and love, and pause, objective pausing of what we're about to think or what we're about to say. Or if we've already thought it, that little reflexive itty bitty shitty committee, then we focus on second thought. Let's rethink that instinctive thought that just came to mind. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I would also add to that I, I've not been one to shy away from getting emotional on this show, so forgive me if I do. I spoke last episode about how proud I am to go to therapy, right? And to do that work, that internal work. And one of the exercises that my therapist did that initially I balked at, but I have to tell you has been really transformative, is so putting it out there, I'm a people pleaser, and I also live my life with the fear that I'm being too demanding, right? That I ask too much of people. It's one of the reasons why I say sorry so much, right? Is because I don't want to be a hindrance or inconvenient to others, or to, I over prioritize other people at a cost to myself. And demanding is often the word that I come back to. And it came up in therapy. And my therapist, in front of him, made me talk to little Zachary and say, all those times that you wanted something, a hug, or you wanted some attention, or you wanted whatever, and you didn't ask for it because you didn't want to be too demanding. Go back and talk to Zachary and say, you're not too demanding. And I have to tell you, I think about that all the time. And it seems like such a silly exercise on face value, but it's not. In the same way that a 40-year-old man loving Stitch is not silly, right? There are really huge opportunities for life lessons that we can, because you are absolutely right. Hurt people hurt other people. And you see that a little bit in the movie, where Lilo does kind of hurt Stitch, right? She takes her hurt and passes it to him. And you're right about us doing the work with ourselves first. So I just wanted to show you that it totally made sense. And that was my connection with what you were saying. And one little activity or one little takeaway that has worked for me that might work for other people is talking to little you and liberating themselves from that label and saying, you're not too blank. You're not. Anyway, does that make sense?
Not only does it make sense, it's just the most beautiful and most perfect way to end this episode. Thank you, Zachary. Beautiful, beautiful, salient crux of this episode. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
You are not only like Goldilocks, you are not only just right, you are simply enough, just as you are, period.
In my spicy hottiness, right?
In your spicy hottiness.
It still makes me laugh. And I'm going to throw it right back at you. I'm going to throw it right back at you. You are simply enough, just as you are, period. And you are part of my ohana. You're my family, and family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten.
Love you.
Love you.
Love you all, everybody. I hope you got something out of this episode or previous episodes. And again, just sending out there, you are not alone. Reach out to us. If you feel that you're connecting with us and want to share anything with us, we welcome you. We love you.
Bye.
Bye.